Chinese society is falling apart, so the CCP is making a desperate move to prevent the next big protest. But it might end up causing it. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. China, the communist utopia where everyone's needs are taken care of, and what's that, Shelley? Almost 1 billion people live off of less than $300 a month? Not bad, huh? Well, no wonder protests are becoming more and more common. People have even started calling for an end to the CCP. And so, in the hopes of staving off a revolution, China is trying to expand its social safety net. You know, the one communism promises but never actually delivers? Real quick, before we get into that, let's check in with some of the people YouTube has secretly unsubscribed this week. Raymond says, I just checked to make sure I'm still subscribed to your channel after you made the statement that viewers were being systematically removed, and sure enough, I was one of them. I just subscribed again, so let's see how long it lasts. Keep up the good work. A Mind for All says, I've been wondering what happened to you. Just checked, and apparently I'm not subscribed. And GN says, I love this channel so much. I had to sub 3 times this year. Thanks, YouTube. So, be sure to subscribe. And leave a honeypot emoji in the comments below to show YouTube we know why their fingers are so sticky. So, last month, the Chinese Communist Party made it mandatory for employers and workers to make social insurance payments. That's basically China's version of payroll taxes. It covers things like medical care, maternity leave, pensions, unemployment, and a host of other benefits. Now, at first, this might sound like a good thing. The problem is the current terrible state of China's economy. According to The Diplomat, in labor-intensive sectors like manufacturing, logistics, and hospitality, it's been common for firms and workers to privately agree to forego social insurance payments in exchange for slightly higher take-home wages. In fact, according to the New York Times, a survey last year of more than 6,000 Chinese companies found that less than 30% fully complied with social insurance requirements. Makes sense. Short-term gain for long-term nothing, since living under communism doesn't exactly make you optimistic about the future. As one woman told the New York Times, if people like us have to keep paying for another 20 years, will I even live 20 more years? Even if I live to see that point, can I be sure I'll get this money? There's the optimism of a communist society. This practice was always technically illegal, but local CCP authorities often overlooked it. Why? Well, firstly, there's no rule of law in the country. Whatever serves the party's interests goes. Organ harvesting? Go for it. And since this practice eased business burdens and locked employment into place for a lot of people, local officials often turned a blind, organ-harvested eye. But now, China's Supreme People's Court has ruled that all employers must pay into the fund, no ifs, ands, or buts. In other words, the state isn't turning a blind eye any longer. Well, why? Simple, it no longer serves the interests of the party. But first, if you like this kind of deep dive into what's really going on to China, you've got to subscribe to my premium website, ChinaUncensored.tv. That's where you'll see episodes and live streams we can't put on YouTube. And if you want to support China Uncensored, buying a membership is the best way you can. It's just the price of a bag of coffee. Once again, that's ChinaUncensored.tv. So you see, as Chinese people have fewer and fewer babies, the country is aging rapidly. It's approaching Children of Men territory, but without all the incredible one-shot action sequences. Some studies estimate that in a decade, funds in the country's pension system will run dry, which means more money has to come from somewhere. As it is, the CCP has raised the retirement age and is trying to get seniors to spend more money domestically to boost the economy. You know the government isn't doing well when receiving $5 and a birthday card from your grandma is a cornerstone of their economic recovery plan. But that doesn't solve the immediate problem. There are just too many old people drawing pensions and too few young people paying into the social insurance fund. The CCP really needs money to flow into that fund. So, sorry young people who wanted a slightly higher wage now, there's just one problem. China's economy is teetering on the edge of the abyss, and this could easily push it over the edge. So short-term pain for long-term, also pain, which would be a great subheading for a book on the history of communism. For starters, some of the employers that now have to pay Social Security are small or medium-sized businesses that simply can't afford more business costs. According to The Diplomat, full compliance with the new court orders would increase employers' labor costs by 30 to 40% and reduce employees' take-home pay by 10 to 15%. So not only is that less money in the pockets of Chinese workers, but it also might mean mass layoffs as businesses try to figure out how to survive the new costs. Or businesses might turn full-time positions into multiple part-time positions to avoid paying Social Security, which, as an American, doesn't feel familiar to me at all. Nope, not one bit. Other employers could also hire retirees, who can usually come back to work without triggering any social insurance obligations, though those employees don't typically last as long due to, being old and almost dead. But what that means is even fewer jobs for young Chinese people, who are already struggling with incredibly high youth unemployment. There are businesses in China that have postings for jobs that suggest they want cheaper younger labor, and they say they prefer workers under 35 years old. But this means that mid-career professionals could be pushed out of the workforce even more. And many of these people end up moving back in with their parents to save money. This trend is called Kenlao, which means gnawing on the old. Metaphorically, this isn't a throwback to the Great Famine. This is the reverse of what has historically happened in China, where the next generation cares for their elders as time goes on. And as it spreads, it's straining the household finances of the parents, which means less consumption, less economic activity, and an even worse economy for China. In other words, while the ruling was meant to help the economy, it might actually hurt it more by creating a chain reaction of disasters. Ooh, that's another great subheading for a book on the history of communism. So fixing the Chinese economy has become like trying to plug a hole in a dam. You plug up one place, and it just makes more leaks somewhere else, and pretty soon, the whole thing is going to burst. There is something the CCP could do, though. Let go. Stop trying to control every aspect of Chinese society and the economy, and let the free market decide. But that's the kind of reform the CCP would never do. They blame the collapse of the Soviet Union on that kind of economic reform. So they'll just keep making bad decisions, trying to fix the previous bad decision until the CCP takes China down with it. Thanks for watching. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.